Good afternoon, everyone. Good morning, good evening, wherever you are joining us from. It's a delight to welcome you to our seventh mentoring webinar at the African Academy of Sciences. It's always one of those things that are really fulfilling for us to do here at the Academy, to try and connect with mentors and mentees or institutions who are setting up mentoring schemes and are trying to figure out what can we do with people who need support to grow to the next stage in their careers. So we hope for the next 2 hours, the panel that we have today will help us to figure out some of these things concerning mentoring on the African continent. My name is Grace Mwaura. I coordinate the AAS mentoring scheme. We've been doing this for over a year now, but I also manage our community fellows and affiliates at the African Academy of Sciences. With me, we have Professor Asan Jaya, who is one of our fellows and as well a mentor on the AAS mentoring scheme. We have our AAS affiliate, Barbara Berman, who is also one of our mentees on the mentoring scheme and also has been a mentor on other platforms. I should be telling us about that later. And then I have a friend of mine for many years and a colleague, Dorothy Mukebi from Award, who has designed and implemented one of the mentoring scheme for women in agricultural research on the African continent. And she'll be talking to us about that later on. So I want to take you through what we're going to do today. And if you're looking at the screen, you'll be able to see the instructions. You will remain on mute for the rest of the webinar. If you need to ask any questions, use the questions tab to put the questions to the panelists. We will try to respond to as many as we can, but we cannot promise to respond to all of them. But in any way, please ask your question because we hope this webinar will be as interactive as possible. If you have any technical issues, for example, your sound is not working, you cannot find where the questions tab is, you can raise your hand or you can use the chat box for such kind of issues. As I have talked, this webinar is all about mentorship. You're going to be sharing about models of mentoring, the experience from mentors and mentees, also lessons learned from mentoring across the continent. As we advertise, these webinars are most ideal for post-PhD, early and mid-career researchers, but also you're most welcome if you're below this stage or above this stage. Our mentors are most welcome to this webinar. We haven't connected with you in a long time, but we hope this is going to be a fulfilling webinar for you. So I want to say a few things about the AAS mentoring scheme before I invite our speakers, because it's the reason why we are having this webinar. One of the things that we do at the Academy is that we are working on building a critical mass of scientists who also become leaders on the continent so that we can transform the continent. And one of the ways that we are doing that, besides offering grants to scientists on the African continent, is also to mentor these early career scientists so that they can actually have the infrastructure, but also the soft skills they require for them to be working in an environment that it is on the African continent, which is quite difficult. So that's the vision of our mentoring scheme. And so our goals are to support individual career development pathways of these early career researchers and to ensure that we also have a critical mass of mentors and role models. The reason why we start at a higher level of mentoring, that is post-PhD researchers, is so that we can mentor them and then they will start mentoring the students they're going to have as PhD students, master's students, undergraduate students, and that generation will be able to mentor another generation. So we are really interested in building this critical mass, not just of scientists, but also of scientists also become mentors on the continent. And our mentoring is not only on the scientific expertise, we are looking at the leadership styles, we're looking at science communication, public speaking, how you engage with policymakers, how you can become an innovator, and also how you can manage better the work that you do. But most importantly, we're also looking at how can you as a scientist continue to thrive. So we're interested in your well-being as a person, because we know in as much as you can achieve so much, you can only do that up to a certain limit. So at what point do you actually pause and take a break and take a rest and rejuvenate? So those are some of the things that our mentors will help you with. Well, at this, if you need more information, you can go to the African Academy of Sciences website, www.aasciences.africa, and you can add a stroke mentorship scheme, and you'll find more information about what we do. But for now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to move straight into the presentations for the day. And this is how we're going to take the presentations, after which you're going to take all your questions. We'll start with Professor Asan Jai, who is a senior scientist and the head of research training at the Medical Research Council in the Gambia, which is associated with the London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine. After that, we're going to listen to Barbara Berman, who's a postdoctoral fellow at University of Cape Town, and then Dorothy, who is the Deputy Director of Operations at the African Women in Agricultural Research and Development. So allow me, I'll just switch my screens as I hand over to Professor Asan so that he can make his presentation. Over to you, Asan, as I put up your slides.
Thank you very much, Grace. I would like to thank you for organizing this webinar series. I think it's very important, and mentorship traditionally has been, within the enclave of business institutions. But over the last 20 years, science have started realizing the importance of mentorship, and it's being adopted gradually in the scientific institutions. And I personally feel that mentorship is a key to a career success of a young scientist, and that the development of future generations of scientists need to be guided for us to get that critical mass of talented scientists. So I would like to just be brief. So I'm more interested in the discussions and the questions. I will go on to what you have asked me to talk about, and that is the attributes of a good mentor. But first of all, the overall role of a mentor is to really promote the growth and development of beginning researcher to improve research learning. This actually is not even very correct. I'm saying beginning researcher because I want to emphasize that mentorship is now a sine qua non for early career scientists. It's a must that one has to do it if you want to really define a good career trajectory. But it's not necessarily only for beginning researcher. Even senior researchers need mentors, because the other role is that it serves as a collegial and emotional support for this challenge. I mean, for either your career or for a challenging phase in your scientific career. Just to know, just for the benefit of some of the audience, that they confuse mentorship with supervision. Mentorship is largely and wholly a professional development focused, and supervision is more of a job and performance focused. But that doesn't mean that mentorship sometimes doesn't, get some, whole picture of performance, doesn't base the conversation on performance as well. So, but I want to just emphasize that the basic crux of mentorship is actually professional development guidance. And it's important to know that a good mentor, to start with, a good mentor teaches you how to think, not what to think. Next slide. So having an idea of really what the role of a mentor is, what are the qualities of a good mentor? I think you cannot get a mentor who doesn't have the relevant expertise or the knowledge or the experience, because that mentor is expected. The expectation is that he should align his or her interest to that of the mentee. but also able to share life experiences and wisdom, as well as the technical expertise. But to do that, this mentor must have that enthusiasm for sharing that expertise. He has to be passionate, and he has to have that sense of positivity towards you. Because that's the only way the mentor can be able to make informal appraisal and monitor the growth of a mentee. A mentor's enthusiasm is seen by the mentor living, sleeping, and breathing with the signs that or the signs that concerns him or her. And I can remember when I had a mentor in my postdoctoral years 25 years ago. I used to get amazed by my own mentor. Wherever we traveled together, the whole journey would be about, talking about science itself, nothing else outside it. He's not interested in anything outside that. So it was the passion that I could first realize in a mentor. But for that to also happen very well, the mentor has to have a respectful attitude. He should treat everybody in high regard in order to inspire that confidence. And so you need to remember that, mentorship, the mentee drives that relationship, though, but then he or she can only do that if he has that sense of respectful attitude coming from the potential mentor. So the mentor must show good leadership in building trust in that relationship, and that the attitude is important. But the mentor has to have that eagerness to invest in the mentee in order to offer that perspective on professional development. That eagerness also is guided by the enthusiasm or the passion, but the mentor has to have in mind that he would want to be admired as a researcher role model. The next slide. The ability to give honest and direct feedback is very critical for a mentor to have that, because the mentor sees the whole picture and can always give the insight into the science trajectory of the mentee. But for that to happen, the mentor has to have that reflective listening and empathy. He has to be a good listener, a good observer, and a good problem solver. And recognizing and maximizing, in order to recognize and maximize the strengths of the mentee. But this has to be accompanied with the compassion and understanding, and always ready to provide support on personal problems. The last thing, I think a mentor's quality should be somebody who has willingness to be a sponsor. In other words, he should be always in a position to look out for opportunities for the mentee and for networking and collaboration. He should make efforts to know, accept, and respect the goals and interests of the mentee. So to sum up all these qualities or attributes of a mentor, I think is seen by a very famous, which I think most of you have seen, the famous Oprah Winfrey's quotation, where a mentor is someone who allows you to see the hope inside yourself. So the next thing I will talk about quickly would be what mentors stand to gain from mentoring young scientists. I was asked this question when I once offered a mentorship seminar in our institution. And I think it's important for mentors to understand that mentorship grows leadership capacity. Because when you're a mentor, you gain critical skills to improve a leader. So in bringing out the best in others, or how to be diplomatic while getting results, these actually are very good attributes that you develop during this mentorship conversation over years. And that confidence you gain, as a mentor, is a definite transferable skill to leadership in a workplace. The second reason why mentors should really involve themselves in mentoring is that the lessons you teach are good reminders of yourself. You remind yourself to strive for higher standard each time you tell your mentor or your mentees rather to believe in him or herself and to be kind to him or herself. It makes you reflect on your own life and consider your own lessons. And I think this is important in professional development itself. So the next thing that you can gain as a mentor is that mentorship can force you to step back and gain perspective. You advise with the benefit of more context. And so you strive to provide clear and sound information, but also a whole picture. This, you, as an academician, will force you always to really improve on the wider picture or to make sure you transmit the wider picture, accurately. And so that in itself, as an academician or as a leader, it's important to gain that habit. The next thing is that mentees, and this is important, mentees can teach you something too. A mentor is not an all-knowing person, and you don't, as an academician, position yourself to be an all-knowing person. I remember I had a mentor when I was seconded at St. Anthony University, and this mentee, I had a mentee, and this mentee was so proficient in computer that I was so glad to learn a lot from him. And the other thing is, these interactions allow you to uncover certain other things that you benefit a lot from these mentees, and they are more current in their in their endeavors, and they get the latest information sometimes and best practices and new techniques in the area that you are actually offering. Even though you may have the clear whole picture and perspective better, but there are certain small nitty-gritties that they can be very good at, and you will always learn from them in their interactions. Now, before I come to the last one, there was another thing I omitted, which is important, and that is expanding the connections and networks. Cultivating networks is critical. It's a critical factor in career success and progression. And so, you will, as you are mentoring, you bound to build more of your network as you are, also supporting your mentees to expand his or her connections. So that's quite important. What as one of the ingredients that you stand to gain as a mentor. And the last one is very, very important, and that's quite dear to me because it's most institutions, particularly in West Africa, are not are just beginning perhaps to realize the importance of mentorship or institutionalizing mentorship. But at an institutional level, if you build a culture of mentorship, it allows higher number of competitive research grants and research production output as well as research translation. And these are now metrics for assessing university or institutions' excellence. So to improve the ranking of your own institution, you have to participate in the culture of mentorship within the institution. And if you Google the best universities in Africa, which most of them will come, the first 20 or 15 will come from South Africa and maybe East Africa and just 1 or 2 from Nigeria. The reason why they come from South Africa is because they have had this long institutionalized mentorship and support for a long time. And that's why my passion has grown for mentorship, where it's time now for African institutions West African institutions to realize the importance of mentorship and should not be left to chance. They have to institutionalize it. So I'll stop at that. I hope I haven't spoken for more than 10 minutes. And we welcome any question during the course of this.
Thanks very much, Prof. Asanjay. That was a fantastic presentation. My highlight from your presentation was the developmental model of mentoring, whereby it's the mentee who drives the process and the mentor is there to help this person to think about where they want to go. So we're going to move to our next presentation, which will be by Barbara. If you give me a minute, I'll pull up your slide, Barbara, and she's going to talk to us about peer mentoring. And I think this will give us a new perspective about mentoring as well. So over to you, Barbara. Your slide will be shortly.
Thank you, Grace. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, participants. Professor has set a wonderful stage for me to speak. Is one benefit of speaking after your mentors and your seniors is they lay the proper ground for you to speak. My focus today is peer mentoring. You notice I've crossed out mentoring and called it peer-to-peer learning. In my opinion, the term mentoring is still focused on the junior-senior relationships, whereas the peer-to-peer learning is where the learning occurs both ways. We can move to the next slide. So I was asked to speak about peer mentoring, what a mid-career researcher might gain from this. My experience is being a mentor on a virtual mentoring platform, effective time management while contributing to a bigger goal of building capacity in developing countries. I hope I would be able to get to the end of these objectives by the end of my talk. Next slide, please. So, I would want to begin by saying I did not set up or plan to start mentoring at my colleagues. This sort of developed as I went along, and there was no specific template to follow, and I learned a lot of things from my mentees. I learned a lot of things from the mentoring forums I was participating in, from trainings, and most of the content I have borrowed from quotes and information that I felt really captured what I felt about mentoring. So mentoring is a power-free relationship based on mutual respect, trust, and confidentiality. It's about helping the mentee develop their subject knowledge so they become experts in their discipline. There's mutual learning. It's reciprocal roles where the mentee brings enthusiasm and creative ideas. The mentor brings experience and knowledge to the relationship, and both parties critically think as they challenge and engage with each other. In peer mentoring, the mentor and mentee roles keep switching. At one point, you're being mentored by your colleague. At some point, a colleague is mentoring you. Mentoring fosters personal, professional, and career growth through the mentor enabling rather than directly teaching. Next slide. So looking at different types of mentoring, where we look at the structure of the mentoring versus the duration of the mentoring. You could have informal short-term mentoring that happens as needed. Then you could have highly structured short-term mentoring where you set to work with a mentor for a specific period for a specific goal, and that's the end of the structure. Informal long-term mentoring, which is a friendship mentoring where you're available as needed to discuss problems, and the highly structured long-term mentoring, which usually often used for succession planning, which is common in business sector, which is you train and mentor somebody to sort of take over a particular skill. Of all these structures of mentoring, I think I've been involved in the three, highly structured short-term, the informal short-term and long-term, but I'm here to get into a highly structured long-term mentoring relationship. Next slide, please. So peer-to-peer learning, which I also call peer mentoring, is a shift sort of in mentoring from the old and the wise guiding the young. On this slide, I have one of my senior long-term mentors who has known me from medical school and has continued my mentee all these years, even as we both negotiated different roles. And mentoring is shifting to that from a collaborative learning experience with the potential to be powerful and transformational as a mentor and mentee learn from each other. I have Kennedy on this slide, who's a statistician. I'll speak about him on the next few slides, where both of us, our roles have kept on switching from mentor to mentee, and I believe we fall under the informal friendship mentoring, where we have had different experiences of helping each other as we both grow in our careers. Next slide, please. So a good mentor, in addition to everything Professor said, I borrowed these quotes from Gary Travis, who posts very good content on LinkedIn, of course, with acknowledgement and permission from him. Being a mentor isn't just offering advice to someone, it's caring enough to set someone up for success. It's helping the person learn from your own mistakes so they don't have to make them. Looking back at what you would have done 10 years ago and you're talking to somebody who's at that point in their life, you could tell them, I think this, maybe I should have not done this. If you're interested in not taking that path, it's all right. It's drawing on your past experiences and to open doors, first to help people to walk through those doors, to be personally invested in helping somebody succeed, going out of your way to help someone out. And it's partially taking responsibility for their success. I've written or failures, because when you're mentoring somebody, I think you should not only pick out the benefits and say you're only responsible for their success. So if you set up your mentor to fail, I think you should also be responsible for their success. Generally, a supervisor tells you what you need to do. Like you ask your professor, how do I get this done? The supervisor, how do I get this done? How do I get my thesis written? How do I get this done? But you tell your mentor, I want to apply for this opportunity. And your mentor guides you through the opportunity. I would welcome thoughts and ideas on this. Next slide, please. Thought it would be important to mention something about bad mentoring. This came from something where people speak about toxic academia, and the quote is about what actually happens in workplaces and how workplace bullies act. I thought it's important to mention this because, after reading it, I said, if you aspire to be a good mentor, maybe you should be aware in advance of some of the things that would make you a toxic mentor. If you're giving threats to the professional status of your mentees, belittling them, professional humiliation, you're accusing them of lack of effort, intimidating use of discipline, threats to personal standing. And in all honesty, we are not supporting maybe somebody who is actually incompetent, but we're speaking about where the mentor, in all knowing, is aware that this is not true of the mentee, where you give undue pressure, you prevent access to opportunities, withhold unnecessary information, keep the target out of the loop, keep shifting goalposts, repeated reminders of blunders, location of meaningless tasks. You could read all through this, and I think it's good for us to know way in advance before this happens. I think it's unfortunate this information is shared on a website where it has happened, it's after the fact. So I think it's important that we look at this information before the fact and find ways to avoid this. Next slide, please. So at any point I've been asked to speak or write about mentoring, I feel it is an injustice to speak about mentoring without speaking about the people I've actually mentored, because I believe mentoring is about developing other people. It's not developing yourself. I've been involved in clinical mentoring earlier during the start of the HIV programs in Kenya. We had to train and mentor the clinicians to provide ART care, and career mentoring, research mentoring, and science policy mentoring. This is some of the mentoring forums I've been involved in, or opportunities where I've had to mentor people. First formal opportunity in mentoring was in author aid, as well as the HIV program. And I worked with Cambry, Recently, I added a mentor to my title on LinkedIn, and I've been approached by some people who are interested in mentoring. Opportunity Desk, Society for Scholarly Publishing, the International Aid Society, Abstract Mentoring Program, and lots of informal mentoring opportunities. In the limits of time, I would not be able to share about as many mentees as I wanted to speak about, but I'll mention a few. Next slide, please. So on the next slide, we have Akan. Akan is from Nigeria. Akan was one of my first mentees on Author Aid. He requested assistance with the research analysis, and he helped me with those lots of IT problems I was facing throughout as I was finishing my work on my PhD as well as other activities. We've remained in contact from 2016. Akan is specializing in exercise physiology and kinanthropology. He recently started his PhD in the Czech Republic, and we are still in touch. His photo and contacts and information were shared totally with Akan's information. So I've honestly benefited a lot from Akan, having a mentoring relationship with Akan, as well as he has nominated me for actually specific things. Next slide, please. This is Kennedy. I had showed Kennedy on the initial slide where I was speaking about peer mentoring. Kennedy holds a bachelor's in applied statistics, a master's in biostatistics, and is currently pursuing a PhD in statistics and modeling at the University of Bristol. We have been in mentoring-mentee relationship, which switches back and forth from 2014. After leaving Cambridge, he was the national statistician of the modeler at the National AIDS Control Council in Kenya. The focus of mentoring with him, I've been sharing research skills, clinical skills, writing skills with him, and he's provided a lot of statistical help. Actually, I call him my statistics go-to person, and I think each researcher needs somebody, a statistician, who they could consult to help with lots of problems. Next slide, please. This is Kevin, a very new mentee. We're connected on LinkedIn quite recently. Kevin is a statistician, is pursuing a master's in monitoring evaluation. We connected with Kevin, and he was interested in career coaching. We managed to work on interview preparation. I learned how to write job applications and prepare for interviews the hard way on my own by making all sorts of blunders. So I find it a good opportunity to mentor people to avoid some of these blunders so that they can move through the interview process and move into get jobs easier. He's assisted me a lot with preparing M&D drafts, M&D frameworks, and he's very skilled in M&D consulting. The information here was shared with Kevin's permission. Feel free to contact him. Next slide, please. Okay, this is Mavis. Mavis holds a bachelor's degree in sociology, and she's pursuing a master's in monitoring evaluation. She's a very skilled, experienced qualitative data analyst. I've known her from 2011. She's also served as a project lead on a mentoring project on the monitoring and evaluation screening of cancer of the cervix for HIV-infected women. Our mentoring is focused around research skills, mainly she's been leading this project, and she's, I think, winding up the project right now. And she's assisted me with lots of qualitative data management. She's actually my qualitative data person, go-to. Mavis can contact Mavis on her email there. This information was shared totally with her permission. If you want to know more about our mentoring relationship, you can contact her. Next slide, please. This is Maxwell. Maxwell holds a bachelor's degree in information technology. I've known him from 2011 when he was a data abstractor. Coincidentally, Maxwell was actually learning some IT skills at that time, and my IT skills were, for lack of a better term, worse than green. Maxwell helped me analyze some data and started teaching me how to start using statistical software. Well, as later he mentioned that he was glad he was able to actually apply his skills to actually on some clinical information. Over the years, we've remained in touch as he's advanced from being a data abstractor. He's now a data analyst. Our focus has been around career growth and mentoring. Maxwell has assisted me lots with design of data management systems and analysis. This is my databases person go-to. Maxwell contacts are shared there. Feel free to get in touch with him. Information was totally shared with his permission. Next slide, please. So I think before I go into the slide, I want to say there was something about benefits of mentoring. I think so far I've mentioned, the 5 people I've mentioned solve a lot of my problems by having them as my go-to persons, and also me being 100% available for them when they need me. It means it saves me a lot of time to have to find somebody to help me with some things. And working with the same people means they already know what kind of things you need. They already know what kind of information. There's that history. As I said, I didn't set up to be a mentor, but mentoring has also earned me professional recognition on author aid, as well as from the World Academy of Sciences. I put an extract here from the award, which I felt was touched me a lot when it said research mentorship focused on HIV and TB. I think maybe somebody else would have been more interested in the innovations in clinical practice, but I thought that was really touching. The other one was from the Abstract Mentor Program, which I've participated in, I think, for the past 4 years, where we mentor early career researchers to improve their abstracts to promote their chances of being accepted into conferences. So next slide. My aspirations or thoughts, I don't want to call these final thoughts because I think I'm still growing. Everyone has something to offer. And I mentioned to people that I mentor, please take time, teach someone what I taught you. Teach someone how to write a job application, teach someone how to write a CV, coach someone through an interview. And because of that, also I have a lot of networks. You know, somebody says, I need to know this, I know I can ask so-and-so to talk to them. And peer mentoring, I feel, is an untapped resource that transfers skills acquired from vertical mentoring horizontally. I showed Professor Nyunya, who's my mentor for several years, by mentoring my peers. I know Professor Jaya, Professor Nyunya, we are not as many as the number of young career researchers, but once one of those professors teaches you something and you take time to share it with your colleagues who are at your level, you transfer that information horizontally and you have more skilled mentors. The returns on investment in mentoring are immense. I think I've just mentioned a few. I've not mentioned lots of friends, lots of support, emotional support, spiritual support, prayers, encouragement, so many other than professional. So many others I would have mentioned. The open communication, having a powerful relationship with my mentees means they're free. Send me reminders. Actually tell someone, please remind me, I'll not be offended. Maybe I may get busy with other things, and I aspire to have my say-do ratio be 1-to-1, so that I don't be that person who says I'll do it and I don't do it. I aspire to grow as a mentor, learn more things, and always find time to share that with others. I would want to acknowledge the institutions on the next slide and the persons on the next slide, and would want to close here. Thank you, please.
Grace, you are muted. Grace, you are muted.
I'm sorry about that. You missed a very wonderful thank you note to Barbara for sharing her own personal story about mentoring, which also applies to me, because in many ways I'm where I am today, and I have been helping the academy put together this mentoring scheme because someone literally picked me up and walked with me on the journey, who was a senior mentor. But also I've had a group of people who are more or less my age, who have worked with me, who have asked me questions, and I have asked them questions. And it's the reason where I am today and doing this. So let's move to the third presentation, which I think it's going to take a different turn, because now we're going to look behind the scenes from an institutional perspective. What does it take to put together mentoring schemes? And we're going to listen to Dorothy, who has actually coordinated a mentoring scheme for awards. So if you give me a minute, I will share your slides, Dorothy, but you can take over now. Over to you, Dorothy. You see your slide shortly.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you, Grace. Please confirm you can hear me first. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Okay. So good afternoon, good morning, good evening to everybody, and I also want to appreciate the two speakers. I'll add very little to what they've said because there's a bit of repetition or intersection. But from what I would like to highlight is I've worked with AWARD, African Women in Agricultural Research, for several years, and we have had the privilege of designing and developing a formal mentoring program. And in recent years, I've also worked with partners like the African Academy, IDA Africa, we have YPAD, where we have worked together to develop their mentoring programs, so as partners. So I've had a bit of experience in setting up mentoring programs. So I'll just quickly try to highlight a few things. I won't describe what we've done, but more maybe just the process of running a mentoring program. And complement what the earlier speakers have said. And one of my favorite quotes on what is mentoring is, to me, mentoring is a brain to pick, an ear to listen, and a push in the right direction. And it is a relationship generally between an experienced and a more knowledgeable person with a less experienced person. But I think what is important, and I think it was highlighted by the previous speaker, it's a learning and development partnership. So much as one individual is more experienced, it's a two-way of communicating. And I'd just like to highlight a few more benefits. I know the speakers have said it. And some of the benefits we've found from there's a helicopter passing out, from the mentees' feedback. Apart from the scientific knowledge, it's the focus on the individual and just the motivation that the individual benefits and the self-awareness that they get from the mentor as a role model, their career growth and networks. The first speaker emphasized a lot about the mentors' benefit, and I just want to maybe highlight one and two that we could add to that list, is developing mentoring skills which are so badly needed. Because we've done a lot of work on M&E, and we've learned that a lot of people come and say they are mentors, but after they've gone through a formal mentoring program like what we've been running as an institution, the mentors develop skills that they find useful in their day-to-day work. They develop confidence in mentoring. It enhances their professional reputation, meets their passion, and a very important benefit which has been mentioned and I want to repeat is the learning, because you learn new technical skills and the way things are done differently. And the best example I can even give is my own daughter in this house. When we went online, doing everything online, she's become the chief engineer in the house. And she has so many technical skills that the older people don't have. So even as a scientist, you're always going to learn something new from a mentee. So it's a benefit that we should take quite seriously when we think about mentoring. And then the institutions where we come from also have a lot of benefits. And one of it is, it means that you have a staff, apart from the individual, you have a staff that are better performers, and they are also motivated. Even students, whether it's a student that you're supervising or the staff that you have in the institution. So let me run through a little bit about the process, which summarizes what you're seeing on the screen, the process that we go through in running a typical mentoring program. There's so much that I could say, but I just want to summarize. And one of the key items that you start off with is you must identify the goals or the objective of the mentoring. This is at the program level if you're running a mentoring program as an institution, but even for a mentor and a mentee relationship, it must be clear that what are the objectives of the mentee? What knowledge and skills do they want to learn? The mentor is not here to solve all the problems of the mentee. The mentee is not here to get everything from the mentor, but it is something that must be specified. And it works better if you focus on specific skills in the mentoring relationship. Next is, I call it the team. The team is you have the mentor and the mentee. But if we are running a mentoring program at institutional level, it is very important to have a coordinator. And I believe Grace plays this role for the academy, because you have so many mentoring pairs going on in different countries, in different sectors, at different levels. It's always good to have the coordinator. So the perfect or the ideal team is a mentor, a mentee, and a coordinator. And to be able to run a good mentoring program, you must have guidelines. Guidelines on, I mean, people come in and they want to be mentors, people want to be mentees. It's good to have guidelines to guide the whole process. And it's good to involve mentors in developing these guidelines or the process of how the mentoring program should work for an institution. What works for the academy is not necessarily what is going to work in a university or in a research institute. A very important part of it is the matching of a mentor and a mentee. The previous speaker, Barbara, just highlighted a few people that she's mentored. Barbara may be a good mentor for me, but may not be a good mentor for the next person. So part of the coordinator work is to ensure that the mentor-mentee relationship or the matching between the mentor and mentee works, the chemistry works, the interest works. So it's an important part of the process. And to set up a mentoring relationship, we actually recommend that there need to be some kind of orientation. It can be physical orientation, like a workshop where you bring in different pairs of mentor-mentees on a program, or it can be online, like a webinar like we're having now, so that mentors and mentees can learn a little bit on how to be a mentor and how to be a mentee, what are the expectations, and how to undertake the actual mentoring. We have quite a bit of experience on that, and we've developed very detailed guidelines and those are the kind of guidelines that we've shared with our partners as they set up their mentoring programs. We've also been involved in helping certain national programs to set up mentoring programs in the institutions, either the universities or the research institutes. We work in the agriculture sector, but it doesn't matter whether it is agriculture or medical sector. Now, we are working in during very interesting times. Before the corona came on board, or before the corona problem, we were already talking about online mentoring, because sometimes people are not located in the same geographical location. But now with corona, it has become like urgent, or we have no choice, but most of the work has to be done online. So it is important to identify the tools, the software, and there's so much out there that actually many of us didn't know existed until this current situation. So it's good to use the certain communication, special communication tools or platforms, like we're using Zoom, the one we're using today. We have Skype, we have special mentoring, online mentorship online training programs. You can even just use telephone, you can use email. So there are so many opportunities that mentoring can be undertaken using online as an activity. Before it was not a big deal, but right now, because of the situation we are in, it becomes even more critical. And most important is that we need to track and get feedback and learn from the whole process. So we call it monitoring, evaluation, and tracking progress, because you're learning all the time. When we started the mentoring program in our institutions 10 years ago, people didn't have a lot of internet access. Now people have handheld devices, they can use their phones, and internet has improved. So you have to keep learning and adjusting the mentoring program. So let me just, that's just a quick overview of what the process entails. But let me just also mention, what are some of the ingredients of success? I think I've already mentioned the clear objectives, but clear objectives, if it's a program at institutional level, it is important. It may be because you want career growth, it's for career growth. Is it the science part of it, that the technical skills you want to improve of staff? It could be something to do with just staff retention and motivation. So it may be soft skills. I mentioned already the dedicated coordinator. We recommend basic training on mentoring and guidelines. We recommend matching and rematching mentors and mentee until the mentee is comfortable with the relationship and the suitability of the mentor according to their needs. Getting out of the comfort zone. We tend to look for mentors within our sphere of work, where we are either institution, or like a lot of people in the medical field or agriculture, we're just within the same institution. But sometimes we just need to think beyond that. What is it are we looking for to grow in our career? Maybe the mentor should be somebody who is an expert in leadership. Maybe the mentor should be an expert in technical skills or online skills. So we shouldn't be just comfortable with what we know. We should be able to get out of our comfort zone. Look for high-profile mentors who take you beyond anything you've ever thought about. And the use of technology. We really encourage, especially now that there's a lot of technology out there that we didn't know about. And you can just look for a mentor who can help you access all this technology that we may enhance the work that we are doing. Another ingredient for success is getting buy-in from your management at the institutional level, because buy-in also has a lot to do with the access to resources, because it's difficult to run a very successful mentoring program in an institution without buy-in from the management and also some minimum resources to facilitate the mentoring. Let me just mention something about online mentoring quickly, and maybe something about the COVID and how it is affecting the way we are doing things, the little experience that we have at the moment. I see my time is going very fast. We need to look at online mentoring just the same way as the way we do face-to-face, but maybe just prepare the same way and agree on the tools that we use. During this period, one of the recommendations that I would make is that, apart from the typical, very official, everything is about professional work, let's have some empathy. Let's do some check-in on how is the mentee doing and how is the mentor doing and how is it affecting your work. This could take up a bigger percentage of your work, more than you'd have ever, maybe you'd have planned. And it is likely that your meetings will be brief and more frequent than the face-to-face meetings. Even the meeting like today, the webinar, we recommend it to be briefer than if we were having it a face-to-face. And we need to be very familiar with the online tools. And I think the online mentoring has provided new opportunities. We're having no choice on going online, but it means that more people can undertake mentoring and they can have a more diverse pool of mentors to choose from. Some of the challenges is, of course, sometimes you can't do some of the things you do in face-to-face, some of the details, and some of it can be lost in the non-verbal gestures that you do. So my advice, maybe working online, is that this is here to stay with us beyond the COVID. It's likely going to be cheaper. It's likely going to be easy on time. We are likely going to reach a wider scope, a wider people, and it's going to give us more opportunities in terms of looking at mentoring in a different way. I think with that, I would like to stop and maybe answer, come back to answer more questions. On the slide that is on, you can see right now, is that our recommendation is that because we run a formal mentoring program, we really look at it as a stage where you get to know each other, you undertake the mentoring, and you work mentee towards a maturity, and you terminate. We don't want the mentoring to go on forever because you want the person being mentored, the mentee, to also take up mentoring. The relationship may continue in a more informal way, but in a formal relationship, we want a start and an end to it. Yeah. So with that, I'd like to thank you very much. Thank you, Grace.
Thanks so much, Dorothy. And this time I've remembered to unmute myself. Thank you for such a wonderful presentation. As I did with the previous speakers, I'll mention what was my highlight. And my highlight for your presentation was the goals and the learning. Because as we keep learning from what is happening in the mentoring relationships, we keep on changing what we want to achieve with that. And I want to pose one question to the three of you to respond each at a time, starting with Hassan, Barbara, and then you. On something, Dorothy, you mentioned about empathy, and particularly because of the season where we are at, the issue of COVID-19, the uncertainty that comes with that, and our own well-being. And not just that, because we are mentoring early career researchers, or rather young people on the African continent who have been born and brought up, have gone to our universities and passed and got their PhDs during so much uncertainty. How do you go around mentoring those people who actually, their hope, if you can measure the amount of hope in them is maybe at a lower percentage? How do you go about that so that they actually have the energy to turn up for their science career, for their leadership, for their families and everything? So Hassan, Barbara, and Dorothy, if you could say something about that before I come to the other questions that have been posed by the attendees. Over to you, Hassan, and then we'll come to the rest.
Thank you, Grace. I think you've posed a very important question because in situation of uncertainty and sometimes crisis, it can lead to low morale for people who are, for your mentees who are very enthusiastic to get this team going. But what is important is for the mentor also to realize that the resilience that they could get is not in the mentee. And it's important for them to connect more during this time of crisis or uncertainty. And the connection is supposed to now build resilience. And with the message that crisis and uncertainties are also opportunities by themselves. And the mentee should try to evaluate, that's the time he should be rigorous in evaluating, what is actually hindering progress, and what form of resilience he or she should build, to exploit the crisis as an opportunity. And that's important.
Thanks, Astan. Barbara, do you have something to add?
All right. I think sometimes trying to help somebody be hopeful in a difficult time. I think there are a lot of young people who've given up on so many things. One way is I actually honestly share my failures. I tell them I have a whole folder of opportunities I've applied to that I did not make it, and I keep them because you take a lot of time to prepare this application. So you may need the information later for future applications, and some people have been actually inspired to find out that behind all these things that we see, there are also a lot of disappointments, a lot of sadness, and other than that, I say you have to take a step and change your situation. If you don't do it, no one will. And my interest in applying to different opportunities, stems from the fact that, as an adult, you get to hear no every day. So what will a few more no's do to you? So you should not give up. And other than that, I also mentioned right at the beginning of mentoring relationships is your mentor is supposed to help you grow. Your mentor is supposed to share skills, and sometimes people are not willing to be able to make some changes to some things. They're not willing to maybe revise something. I mentioned it upright from the beginning because with experience, I've realized, take a lot of time and effort to work on something, and later the person is not really interested. So sometimes I think it's good for mentors and mentees, sometimes at the level of peers, to tell each other as it is. Like, you need to change this. And that's the only way we'll help one another. That's it from me.
Thanks, Barbara. Dorothy?
Yeah, these are difficult times, so it's very difficult to know what to say sometimes. One of the advice is the regular check-in on each other, mentor, mentee, mentee, mentor, because both are vulnerable at this point. Before we get into the professional part of mentoring, because we are human beings first. So I think at this point, the human part of us has to really be a factor in the mentoring, and to understand each other, where the mentor is coming from in terms of what might be affecting them in this situation, the mentee the same, so that by the time they come to work on the professional part of the mentoring, the empathy part of it is taken care of, even if it's mental health. It's a time when we should not be shy to say what is affecting us. The second point I'd like to just share is leading in crisis, because we had a seminar yesterday that I picked something where it says we can approach this situation from a health or a military way style. Military in the sense that when you plan something in the military way, you know that if you make a mistake, you will come back in a body bag. But if you do it the way business as usual, you go to the drawing boards. So we are living in times of like military way, where you really have to think through whatever I'm going to do, how does it affect my mentee, or how does it affect my mentor? The decisions we make have bigger consequences than normal times. So we really have to get out of the comfort zone to think carefully as mentor or mentee. What does it mean?
Thanks so much, Dorothy. And if you were in a physical room, I would encourage the attendees to clap for all of you for those responses and for those presentations. Now we're going to move on to the question and answer session. And if your video is okay, the panelists, feel free to put it back up. I will ask 3 questions that were posted during registration. After that, I'll pick 3 questions that have been posted today during the session. And as I pose the questions, feel free to respond. So the first question, situation of a reluctant mentee or mentor, what should be done in order to complete the mentoring process? Any of you can go for this.
Okay, Grace, as it has been alluded to by even the other speakers, mentoring should be a voluntary relationship. So if you detect early a reluctance of mentor, or either from the mentee or mentee, that's a no-go. It has to be stopped immediately. There is no process to make that. The mentee has the option. There are two ways of actually getting mentorship. It's either by matching, that's the institutional responsibility, or the second option is the mentee making lots of effort and proactiveness to search for a mentor. And in either way, there could be reluctance in this. And wherever that reluctance is actually realized, it should be stopped immediately because it's not going to go. It has to, then you have to look for another mentor. That's one. The second thing, mentees do not necessarily have to have one mentor. You can have several mentors as possible. So it doesn't, it's not a, it's not a formal, concrete, a process and a relationship that has to take hold every time without any flexibility. It's very flexible, and what drives it is for the mentee to realize that, successful people are actually mentored by very successful mentors. So that's what I can say.
Thanks so much, Hassan. Yes, please.
Maybe if I may add one point, at an institutional level, it's also the work for the coordinator to find out maybe why the mentor or the mentee may be reluctant, because there may be an underlying issue. So it's also just a point to remember.
Thanks, Dorothy, for that. And I was posing this next question to you about what is in a mentor that is not in a mentee.
Okay. In general, a mentor is more experienced or more knowledgeable in the area or field of specialization where they are mentoring or whatever it is, and most probably has more networks. And he has passion to also mentor, although a mentee also should have the passion to be mentored. So on the other side, the mentee is less experienced and wants to learn.
Thanks, Dorothy, for that. I now want to pull out the questions from the attendees who are who have been posing questions to us, and keep the questions coming. This one will go to Barbara and comes from Janine. How can someone effectively play the role of a supervisor and a mentor, or is it not possible to assume dual roles? Over to you, Barbara.
Okay, thanks for the question. It is possible for your supervisor to turn into your mentee, depending on the type of relationship you have. If you so wish to move from supervising your mentee, your supervisee, the student, to move to your mentor, by going beyond what is your job description, like getting the student to get their master's, getting them to get their PhD, and should I say, putting it on your resume, and the student, parts ways, and a few years later, when maybe you're chatting with a colleague and somebody asks, how many students have you supervised? You say, I think 4 or 5. Where are they? And you say, I don't know. The relationship ended at the point the person graduated. But you can, invest more in the person you opt to mentor when you move into a relationship by helping the person move on to the next opportunity, helping the person move on to the next. It's a master's to a PhD to a postdoc, helping them publish, giving them recommendations, keeping in touch for years later, so that sometimes when you apply for these academic opportunities, they want an academic referee, and that's when sometimes you talk to mentees and you ask, don't you know any lecturer who could write you a letter? And they say, I'm not really sure. So that is, I think, how your supervisor can move from being a supervisor to your mentor. But it's important to have a mentor, even when you're having a supervisor-student relationship, who sometimes, may help you keep the focus on some goals. I've had different mentors, different times. Some have come and gone, taught me lots of things. Some have stayed. And just to backtrack a bit on the previous question, I've also had people who have been allocated to me as mentors. Somebody says, so-and-so will work on this with you. And certainly sometimes done without due consideration whether the person was interested. The person is experienced and qualified, of course, to be selected. And some of those relationships have not worked out because maybe the person was not available, the person was not asked, it's not in the person's interest at that time. So you could look at that sort of relationship when you look between your supervisor and your mentor. Thank you.
Thanks, Barbara, for that. I want to pose a question again to the three of you, and you will respond to this later on, about how we go about setting mentoring goals. One of the challenges I have seen in the last 1 year, you will see a mentee has come and they want a mentor, but when you ask them what they want to achieve, they really haven't clarified that in their thoughts. And each one of you could respond to that. And how do you guide a mentee to set goals? Or how does a mentee actually prepare a mentoring goal before they start? They have the initial with the mentor. So we will come back to responding to that question. For now, the next question I want to pose to Professor Hassan, and this comes from, and she would like us to talk a bit about who don't have experience of the African context. So I'll just read the question as it is. Do you have any advice for international mentors who may not be familiar with the nuance of the African context? Over to you, Hassan.
Grace, you've been breaking. I didn't get the full question. It's been breaking. Can you repeat it?
Yes, I will repeat the question. Do you have advice for international mentors who may not be familiar with the nuance of the African context? How can we prepare mentors who are not from Africa to mentor mentees who are on the African continent if they don't have experience of how things operate in Africa?
The question, mentoring framework is standard all over the world. And I don't think a person outside an African continent will have a problem, but it depends on what mentoring or what the goals of the mentoring is. I think this was alluded to by Dorothy's presentation. With academic growth or for academic growth and development, this is standard. That is what I'm experienced with. This is standard, but yes, one needs to be very familiar with an African culture context. That sometimes there are certain, and you need to really get that out of the mentee during the mentorship conversation. There are some cultures that can more or less, not inhibit the person's progress to some extent, but fall sometimes in the way of the person and, their necessities. And the mentor must understand that those African cultural contexts, but other than that, I think for an academic development or academic growth of an individual, it's standard all over in the world, and there's nothing much that the mentor needs to really get beforehand, but can actually learn certain nuances during the conversation. And that brings the importance of your first questions about what is it that you need to establish in the beginning of a mentorship. I think that's what you asked there. And, how do you set the goals? And the mentorship, if I can just come briefly to that, there is what is known as a mentorship conversation. And that mentorship conversation is to, consider the current reality. And the current reality is that the mentee has to define where am I, and then it brings that where am I to a decision-making process to say how will I be there, where will I be, and then you make a decision to come to another level of how am I doing, and then so forth. So that's how certain nuances can actually come about when the mentorship conversation starts. I hope I've answered that question.
Thanks, Asan, for that, for emphasizing the aspect of conversation. So the next question is about evaluation. But before I move to that, I wanted to say something about conversation, because again, one of the challenges I have observed with our mentors and mentees is when our communication skills are not developed to an extent that we can easily open up to our mentors and to our mentees. And perhaps when we go back to answering the question about mentoring goals, we can look around how we actually can come around that, whether writing it on email or paper might be helpful for us to strike such a conversation. Now, Dorothy, I'm going to pose this question to you. It's about evaluating mentoring relationships. Do you have advice for mentors on evaluating a mentee's strength or weaknesses and development when the relationship is completely online? So we are not familiar with their work behavior in actual context. Over to you, Dorothy.
Yeah. I hope I've understood you. I think it's related to how to set up the objectives. Because at the beginning of the relationship, I believe there's communication interactions between the mentor and mentee with the guidance of the coordinator on what the mentee wants to achieve. And one thing I would like to emphasize that a mentoring relationship is all about the mentee, not the mentor to tell the mentee what to do, but to understand what the mentee wants to achieve, but under their guidance. Then once that is established, I think that is the baseline. They may want to publish more, they want to increase their networks, they want to improve in their own personal communication. It can be several things, but I think that setting the objective and the beginning of the mentoring is where the baseline. Then after several months or whatever, you can do some monitoring and midway, and then at the end to see the progress. That's how I would measure the progress of the mentee. Online or face-to-face, a few things may change, but really, if it is even just learning a technical skill in the lab, what have they done and what do they have to do? Because they'll tell you at the beginning, the mentor is likely to tell the mentee, for you to gain these extra skills, maybe you need to do an extra course, or you need to work differently or spend more time on something differently. Then after a certain period of time, you'll be able to evaluate that. Simple but practical.
Thanks so much, Dorothy. And just to emphasize, there's no one size fits all. So each relationship comes with its own way of doing these things. Barbara, I'm going to pose this question to you because you may have experience on this or you may not have. What is the best way to say goodbye to a mentor whom you feel has been acting more of a supervisor and does not support your ideas? Or even maybe when you feel you have achieved as much as you could have achieved from a specific mentor and you'd like to end that relationship. How do you go about closing a mentoring relationship? Over to you, Barbara.
Right. Thanks for the question. I believe when you're speaking about saying goodbye, there must have been a start. And it seems the start, whatever you started with this mentor, maybe is no longer, helping you meet your goals. At this point, usually, in my opinion, it's the mentee who contacts the mentor because Most mentors are actually busy persons, and you maybe are working on something. So if you're not working on anything, I believe maybe you have no, should I say, you have no business checking in with the mentor if there's no specific activity you're working on. But you could actually, that would be sort of the equivalent of, should I say, ghosting? You just stop communicating, depending on how the relationship began. Or you just check in and inform your mentor that you moved on to other things, but you would want to keep in touch in the event that you need more information. Actually, it all depends on how the relationship started. Having been involved in several informal mentoring relationships, I've not really said goodbye to anyone. We keep in touch, we update each other, what you're doing after a few years, this is where I am, it's what I'm doing, and later somebody says, actually, I needed help with this. So I think it's just good to inform your mentor that you're moving on to other things and you would wish to keep in touch. Thank you.
Thanks, Barbara, for that. I remember a comment I made earlier about when Professor San was speaking about mentoring relationships are the only ones where you're allowed to have more than one partner. So you can have as many as your needs are, of course, related to your life goals, and pursue them and maintain them, keep them active or inactive, depending on what you require at that particular stage of your life. So now let's come back to the three of you. And again, we're going to start with Hassan, then come to Dorothy, then come to Barbara on the question of setting mentoring goals. And if you can take the attendees through, how do you go about setting a goal if you're a mentee? And if you're a mentor, how can you guide your mentee to actually figure out what qualifies to be a goal? I had shared with you some of the suggestions that had come through from the attendees. If you can give us some tips on that or your experience on that, it would be very helpful. Over to you. Hassan, we can start.
Yeah, okay. No, I was muted. Are you hearing me now?
Yes.
Yeah. No, that's the foremost importance of starting the relationship is setting up the goals. And it's important that this becomes the beginning of the conversation. And as I alluded to before, when you are meeting the mentee for the first time, you should first of all, before set up the goals, try to explain what the conversation should be. And this conversation, if I can repeat it, is that there should be a context of a current reality, and that is, where am I now? That's the mentor. Where am I now? And this leads to a reflection, where do I want to be? And that question of where do I want to be gives informed decisions of how do I get there. And this is where then the actions come to lead to a question, how am I doing? This is what actually is the composition of the mentoring conversation. And based on this framework of the mentoring conversation, you then work with the mentee for him or her to list the structured goals, the immediate goals, the medium goals, and the long-term goals. And then you start on areas to advise on the immediate goals, how they can be met, but then also make sure there is a timeline. In other words, you have to have milestone for these immediate goals, because the immediate goals, the medium-term goals, are very much dependent on the immediate goals, and so the timeline is important and crucial in this regard. And then once you set up the immediate goals, that comes back again to the mentoring conversation. That is reflection of where am I now, where do I want to be, give informed decisions of how do I get there, and the actions of how am I doing, and then that then transit into the next goals, and that's the medium-term goals, and so forth and so forth. This is how, through experience, you can build that relationship and the confidence at the start of a mentorship. I hope I have answered the question.
Thanks very much. Dorothy?
It's like I have nothing to add, but let me try. I believe before a mentee gets a mentor, they need to have a rough idea what they want from a mentor, because sometimes it is the hard science, sometimes it may be other skills that they want to pick from a mentor. And this is where the coordinator also comes in, to help them identify a mentor who will respond to those needs of the mentee. Then once a mentor is identified, then they will help them to sharpen those goals or objectives. Because if you identify a mentor before you are clear what the mentee wants, it will go to what the mentor thinks the mentee requires, which is, and I said the mentee is actually the primary figure in this relationship. If you don't mind, I want to just mention something about something that Barbara said, which, Barbara, if you don't mind, a bit contradictory to what we recommend. In our model, we recommend that a supervisor should not be a mentor because sometimes there's a clash. Because the supervisor might be actually the problem. Because the mentor, the focus in the mentoring is to the individual, supervisor is more to the institutional goals and objectives. So sometimes, if it's a supervisor, especially in an institution, if the person is a supervisor in the office and then they also are mentoring the same person, sometimes there's a clash. So we try to tell people to avoid having a supervisor as a mentor. Otherwise, what Dr. Hassan has said is the same. You have to know where you want to go and how to get there.
Thanks, Dorothy. Barbara, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, just a little. So I have a slightly different perspective about initiating the mentoring goals. Maybe coming from a perspective of a lot of informal mentoring. One is sometimes when the mentee approaches you, they have a rough idea what they want. Somebody says, I need help in writing a paper. I need help in applying for this opportunity. And from there, you move on by saying, what kind of help do you need, or what kind of help you can offer, and the timelines and all that. The other thing is, I think the mentor, sometimes you meet a mentee who says, I'm not sure, but you're an experienced person. You're like 5, 10 years into your career, you're 20 years into your career. I think you know better. And I feel this is an opportunity for more experienced persons, whatever level of your career, to inform this person of the options. And I think I suffered from this because everybody asked me, what do you want? And I said, but I need to know the options. And I was told, we cannot tell you. So I think it's fair to tell somebody, these are the options. There may be others. These are the ones that I know. Maybe think through some of these options because you have this bird's eye perspective of career where I say you may have made some mistakes when you're younger, your junior career, which you may try and help this person not make. Maybe somebody is, hitting their head against a wall when they could have been moving on to other prospects. So I think it's also useful, if possible, for the mentor to say, I can help you with this, because the mentee doesn't know what you can help them with. Because I can help you with 1, 2, 3, 4, if that's what you're interested in. And if they say they don't really know, you say, what do you want to do? What kind of job do you want to do? I've been contacted by people who are still in college, undergraduate, and they say, I'm just interested in knowing, what I can do after I finish medical school, I finish my bachelor's, and with some insight, there are things you could tell them, like look through jobs you want to do, look through training courses you want to do. Right now, with all these lockdowns, there are so many free online courses. Start doing some free online courses. Start looking for opportunities to apply. And I think I missed that. I learned through so many mistakes. I think I said that. So I think if you can share some perspective with the mentee about what you think they can do, not what they should do, and they at least have that, insight of these are the options that I may have. That's how I think you can help them set mentoring goals. They may say, okay, fine, I think I should do this. Can you help me with this? Then you can move on from there. Thank you.
Thanks, Barbara, for that. We just 3 minutes past 5 o'clock. So, and I have this one question which I've been asked in very different ways by different attendees concerning how we institutionalize mentoring. And Prof, this has been specifically posed to you. So I'd like you to respond to it as our last question. After you respond, you can also make your final remarks, and I'll allow Barbara and Damaris to also do the same. But please share with us your thoughts on how we can institutionalize mentorship, and especially in our institutions of higher learning, as well in our research institutions where most of the younger generation have to pass through so that we actually can start working on this leaky pipeline. Over to you, Hassan. Hassan, if you're speaking, we can't hear you. You might be on mute. Let's see. I might have mute you as well. Let me check. Now unmute yourself.
Okay. I think you muted me, so I couldn't unmute.
Yes, now you're good. Yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah, it's a very important question and something close to me because as I alluded to my jurisdiction, I'm more interested in bringing excellence, or upgrading excellence in African institutions, research institutions. And I'm a firm believer that for that to happen, for that excellence to happen, there must be an institutionalized mentoring scheme. And I think I like Dorothy's presentation in that aspect. But first and foremost, there has to be a buy-in from management that this is an important aspect that will contribute to raising the excellence of the institution. That's one. Number two, if it's really purposive for academic excellence, it has to come along with career structure, because there's no point trying to mentor people when there is no institutional career structure that people understand and what it takes to move into that trajectory of the career. So this has to happen for people to be convinced that they need to be mentored within the institution, and also for the mentors to believe that they have to mentor people. That's what. Secondly, it has to target talented people, and this is what normally academicians should want, because identifying very talented people is another process. You need to identify people who you think are actually very good, and they can become like you, or they can do better than you because of specific talents that they do have. Now, these are processes that the institution must consider, but then starting it operational, there has to be guidelines to this. One, and there should be matching procedures for this that the institution should understand. And there should be a coordination and evaluation unit for this, just similar to exactly how you are operationalizing it in AAS. That kind of a coordination and evaluation unit must be established, but not left to that the lecturers or the professors or the academicians should just do it willy-nilly. It doesn't work that way. There must be a coordination unit. That's how you institutionalize it. Similar to the operational unit that you have managed to build there. And that's how the matching can happen effectively, and the advice can happen for the identification of talents, and then the career structure can actually be built and developed for people, for that mentoring to be effective. But then there has to be also the training aspect basic training for both mentors and mentees, and regular, what I would call, if I borrow your own system of what you call mentor. I mean, is it mentor class or class mentoring or mentor class? You know, where, sorry, class mentorship.
Master class, yeah.
Yeah, so where you can, you know, frequently or regularly have that kind of 1 day, 2 day workshop within the institutions to build the culture. Building the culture through sharing that best practice. And this is how the institutionalization of mentorship can grow within an institution. The whole idea is to build the culture of mentorship within a framework of an institution that you've organized in the institution itself. I hope I have answered the question.
Thanks so much, Prof. Do you have any closing remarks as we wind up this webinar?
Except to thank you very much, Grace, for this wonderful, you know, for this wonderful organization and, you know, your thoughtful, you know, idea to have this ongoing. I think it's important. I think we African today, with the advent of the pandemic of COVID, many people now are convinced that we need to uplift talents, we need to uplift scientific talents, we need to uplift all kinds of leadership talents, you know, all kinds of talents, you know, because on the whole, that is what the pandemic has taught us. And to do that, we need to increase the critical mass of competent, you know, competent leaders, you know, be it in research, be it in administration, be it everywhere. And we can only do that through, you know, through programs like this that add value to the whole objectives. So I would like to thank you very much. And for those who attended, we thank you for your time and for your interest in this. And we hope whatever you have learned from this, you can also be a vehicle to your institutions to advocate for the need of, you know, institutionalized mentorship or similar programs as this, you know, for people to be more aware of the importance of it. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Professor Hassan. I'll allow Barbara and Dorothy to make their final remarks in that order because we're already 10 minutes past the hour. Barbara, please.
All right. So my final thoughts would be around asking, you know, everyone to feel free to contact mentors, contact someone in your network who you think can help you. Have a thick skin. We'll be willing to accept rejection. You know, when you ask somebody to help you and they say they can't help you, sometimes it's nothing to do with you. It's just their priorities and their time, and they may be handling many competing priorities. Have a thick skin to accept rejections. Success has come after a lot of hard work and a lot of applications. Please find time to mentor other people. If you have high school leavers in your network, people fresh from college, please take time and teach them to write a job application. Teach them something. Don't assume you don't have anything, and let's learn from the experiences of others. Let's not try to do the mistakes in our lives. Let's learn from the mistakes of others. Thank you so much for everyone who participated, and thank you, Grace and AIS, for inviting me to this webinar.
Thanks, Barbara, for that and for your contributions. Very highly appreciated. Dorothy, please.
Thank you, Grace. And I think the first speaker was very thorough in outlining what needs to be done in institutionalizing mentoring. So for me, it's just maybe to repeat a few key points is because I know there are participants who want to set up mentoring programs in their institutions. It's very important to have to outline what are the objectives of the mentoring program, because different institutions will have different objectives. Allocating resources is linked to buy-in from the management. So the management has to have buy-in, and to allocate time to a coordinator, which means it's part of their job description. It's not something just on the side for a mentoring program to operate effectively at institutional level. And I think the speaker also said it, and I repeat, there have to be some guidelines and training. And that is where questions like on diversity, culture, personality all come in, because people need to understand different cultures, different personalities. What is a good mentor for one person is not a good mentor for the other. So some basic training on mentoring is important. And rewarding and recognizing people who are mentoring. Maybe that's part of like their performance evaluation. That's what is institutionalizing mentoring and buying in. So they need to be acknowledged, even if there's no monetary benefit. It will help in motivating them. So my parting skills is also maybe just to appreciate having this opportunity, and also to not forget the soft skills part of mentoring. It is so important because we focus a lot on the science, but sometimes we forget about the soft skills that are so important. And we're discovering that, I think, during this period when we are in isolation, the soft skills are also, and other skills, other technical skills are so critical. So thank you very much.
Thanks so much, Dorothy, for your wonderful contribution to this webinar. The three of you, if I didn't have you, would not have had such an exciting conversation. And to those of you who have posed questions and you have not had me read them out, some of them have come in much later from Josephine, Mohammed, Radha, Janine. Thanks so much for the many questions that you have asked, which have all been very useful. We may not be able to respond to those questions, but broadly, I can see they are touching on the aspect of institutionalizing mentoring. And I will take all those questions together because we are still building on the mentoring scheme, and we will see how best we can start addressing these issues on the African continent, perhaps thinking about the ideas that Professor Hassan has shared with us. So thank you very much to everyone for joining us today. I'm delighted, as I said, as we were starting this webinar, to see the contribution that you have brought. But I'm also delighted that we did have several of our mentors who joined the AAS mentoring scheme for the first time. So as you can see from your screen, it's just a call for mentors. If you feel you have the motivation and the experience to mentor mentees who are beyond their PhD so that they can transition to the next stage in their career, feel free to sign up on our online mentoring scheme. As you can see from your screen, you can drop us an email and we can guide you through that, and we can find you a mentee in the coming weeks. My final announcement from this webinar will be concerning our next webinar. I started this webinar by saying that I also coordinate our group of early career researchers, we call the affiliates, who we select 40 of them every year, and we support them for a period of 5 years to build their skills in the various fields. So next week, they'll be running a webinar on COVID-19 and their perspectives, how they have been participating in the science, in public engagement from different African countries. So feel free to join this webinar. You can register. If you go to our website, you'll find the details. You'll also find the information online from our social media accounts, and engage with us and invite other people to join us. Otherwise, from my end, I want to thank you very much for your contribution. We hope you can become a mentor with us, or you'll be if you're a mentee, you have better skills equipping you. You realize I haven't talked a lot about enrolling mentees because at the moment we haven't yet met the need we have of the current cohorts of mentees we have at the academy. We hope in the next 1 year or so we'll be able to enroll mentees from other institutions or from other places. We hope though this webinar has also been helpful for you to prepare for that. I want to thank my colleagues Gladys and Wycliffe for being in the background helping us to set up this webinar. And until next time, have a lovely evening and have a safe moment wherever you are, and mentor someone or allow yourself to be mentored by someone. Goodbye to everyone.